So as you think about this chords, sometimes the pattern that we practice can easily get us into a mode of only hearing one kind of instances, right? So you want to make sure when you're practicing chords, especially if you're playing on the keyboard or something, that you don't fall into this pattern of 3, 4, 3, 4, 4, 3, 4, 3, where it's a very predictable pattern, right? So make sure you put in things so that you're making about 3 mistakes per session, per 3 or 4 when you do a pass through. So whether it be 2 lines of Dandelot or a set of chords, right? You should be, if you're getting all of it right, then you need to throw in an element where it's a little bit more challenging for you to brain to sort of perceive, right? So it's like that old psychology study where there was 2 sets of words, right? One participants had words that were very clearly printed, and then they actually had more trouble memorizing that set of list of words. And then a second set of people had words that were like, letters are missing, and it was not clear typeface. So it was harder for them to actually perceive what the word actually was, and then it was easier for them to memorize that second set of words. Right. So in terms of our dichord exercise or Dandelot exercises, you want to try to kind of push your comfortable boundary as far as you can so that you are making 3 to 4 mistakes. Okay. So continue to work on those. Today we're going to do a deep dive into Beethoven 5. I had asked you to think about the hypermeter phrasing where where let me share the screen so we can actually look at the score and talk about it. All right. Actually, let me go to landscape mode, and then it'll be actually a little bigger. Okay, so if I go to landscape mode, the page won't turn. So we had introduced this concept where instead of being in bar phrasing, right, we're thinking about it as this kind of hypermeter where we really have that first initial note is a pickup bar, right? And then you have a set of bars that makes up a 4/4 bar, right? Da 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 1, 2, and a 3. And so this is sort of a bar that has thrown off many conductors and people in analyzing this movement, right? Because they consider this bar right here, where it becomes, wait, is that an extra bar or is that just the hold, right? And that extra bar causes sort of throws a wrench into this idea of hypermeter. But I think there are enough proof in the music. So was anybody able to find that extra five bar phrasing in the first movement? No? Okay. All right. So I will show you that a little bit later on. But basically, most of the movement is in a 4-bar phrasing system. So if you go to the end of the first end of the exposition, so the previous page, we have that the last measure is phrase 1, right? And then the next page, phrase 2, 3, 4, and then ba. Then you have 3 bars left, right? And that's in a way the first proof that in fact the movement began with bar number 4 of a hypermeter, right? To complete that thought process, completing that sentence, right? So it's not 1 and a 2, 3 and a 4, 5, 6 and a 1, right? So that doesn't make sense, right? But in the sense that because the movement, the exposition ends with this 3-bar phrase, which is incomplete until it returns to the beginning, then it is a complete 4-bar phrase. And in the end, at the very end, same thing happens where it is a, okay. So you have a 4-bar phrase, bump, beep, bump, beep, bump, beep, 4 bars, yum, dum, ba. And that's a 3-bar phrase as well, Okay, so that really, it's Beethoven is really conceptually thinking about it as a hypermeter 4-bar phrase, where the first bar is a fourth bar of a phrase, and then the end of the exposition, end of the movement, has an incomplete 3-bar phrase, so that that fourth bar is completed at the end of it. Okay, now there are a couple places where we have an unusually longer phrasing than a 4-bar phrase, and oftentimes that happens in a situation where he's extending the progression into it's a 4+2 or 2+4 bar 6-bar phrase. So the first place that occurs is a place like here, where da da pa pa bi da pa pa bi da pa pa bi da pa pa is that idea is extended 2 more bars. Di da pa pa bi da 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 di da 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 di da 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 pa pa bi da 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 di da 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 di da 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 pa pa pa. Right. So these are clearly 4-bar 4-bar, right? And then before the 6-bar, it's da 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 di da da da. That's a 4-bar phrase. And then starting after the fermata, right? That first bar here is a 4-bar phrase. Right? 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then here is the 1, right? But if you do, if it's not a 6-bar phrase, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, what happens? So it's a natural extension of this musical form, this motive, ba da ba ba, which is repeated 6 times in a ascending order. Right? So that's an example of a 2-bar extension of a 4-bar phrase. Okay. So another place that occurs, it goes along. Now, here's a really controversial place, because most people ba 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 bim bam ba dee da dee da dee da da dee da 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 dee da da. Oftentimes, people play that as if it's a downbeat. This measure, right? It's the piano dolce. The first violins come in. So most people, instead of thinking about it as a pickup bar, they think of it as 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and, right? So in fact, if you follow this hypermeter structure, the horn call ba 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 is a 4th bar. 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and dee da dee da 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 dee da. So this is an example where if you have the wrong first bar of a hypermeter, how you phrase this place can make a huge difference on how the players think about and how the audience hears this music, right? So instead of thinking of it as 1 and 2 and, it's 4 and 1 and 4 and 1 and, so that musical expression of ti dum ta da ti da 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 ti da dum ti da 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 ti, right? So it's a place where the hypermeter, how you phrase it, can make a huge difference in how you interpret the passage. All right. So that 4-bar phrase goes along, and then there's another 6-bar phrase right here. Right. Now here the emphasis changes to we've been da da di da 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 di da da da, and then di da di dum ba dum di dum ba dum pi dum ba dum pi da 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 di da di dum ba. So this last 2 phrase, you can interpret as a 2+4 or a 4+2, depending on whether you think this figure is the emphatic, and that's the di da 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 di da da dum b. And so it's where you want to put the 2, either at the beginning, 2+4 or 4+2. How you interpret that. But that is another idea of extending the 4-bar phrase. Okay. Then we follow along on the 4-bar phrase, 4-bar phrase, 4-bar phrase, 4-bar phrase. And then, of course, there's the incomplete 3-bar phrase, and it goes back to the exposition beginning. Okay. And then, let me show you where the 5-bar phrasing is. So here's another 2-bar extension of a 6-bar phrase. All right. There we go. All right, now here, we've been going along this chordal shift, beam, bum, boom, beam, bum, beam, and then one chord, one chord, one chord, one chord, and that goes along. And then a lot of orchestra members, when they play this piece, this always feels like it's wrong, right? So they always come in early on this bar, ba 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 b, and it's especially because it's pianissimo, it's a ti ba b ba ba ba, and somebody always comes in early because they expect a 4-bar phrase here, but it's in fact a 5-bar phrase. So that's the first 5-bar phrase. And the next one is here. And it's another sort of plays ba 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 beep ba 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 bum da 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 dum, and it should be right here at 389. That the fortissimo should be coming in, but ba 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 bum, nope, ba 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 ba. So it's another a 4-bar phrase that's just been extended, and sort of Beethoven's little joke. I'm just going to give you an extra bar there, right? So those two 5-bar phrases uh, are the exception to the rule of this 4-bar phrasing. And then, of course, they're the 2-bar extensions, which are 6-bar phrases, right? So now, if you go through different conductor's thought process, so let me go to an example where I'm going to show you Beethoven, Bernstein's score on the, and this is a great resource that I would really encourage you to look at. This is one of those scores that is not quite heavily marked up. Okay, so that equivalent place that I just showed you here. So he marks it as. Let me see. Yeah, so see that little squiggle 5M, right? So I think he also thinks of that as a 5-bar phrase, right? Oh, no, I went to the wrong place. Hang on. I just had it. Where'd it go? Yeah, right here. Sorry. I pressed the wrong button. So he thinks of this. So I'm not sure why in a lot of places Bernstein uses this phrasing mark, but here he really doesn't use the hypermeter system. So he's really thinking a bit, but that's surprising to me because most of Bernstein's scores have this phrase structure. But here, instead of marking it as a 5-bar phrase, he marks it as a 3-bar phrase. So that's a little curious how he's thinking about it, right? Okay, and then I'm going to show you another. There are two. Wait, was that one? Yeah, there's this one and this one. But let's go to this one first. This is by I believe Peter Fender, who's a conductor in the UK, and he also talks about this idea of a hypermeter. And the person who's really made this a thing is Gunther Schuller. And in his book, The Complete Conductor, and complete is spelled this way for him, he talks about this exact idea of this hypermeter, 4 and the 1, 2 and the 3. And so here is sort of fudging the rules a little bit because even though there's an extra bar, he counts this as just one big long 3, 4 and the 1 and the 2 and the 3, right? And then here he also talks about da da di da da da, and then 4 and the 1, 2, 3, 4, and yeah. So here is the 5-bar phrase. Okay, so I will send you links to this article. You should read up on this. And then also here, another page talks about he misspells the complete conductor. It should be a LEA, but talks about this idea of hypermeter. Okay, so is there a question on this idea of hypermeter?
I have a question. So hypermeter is meant to help us understand how to conduct like how to understand it, how to like digest it, right?
Right, because in terms of knowing the phrase structure is really crucial in knowing how to make sense of all the bars. Because one of the things that in a piece like Beethoven 5 first movement, that can easily occur is da 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 dee ba 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 beep 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 bum ba 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 beep 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 bum. So you lose that sense of phrasing, right? So it's quite easy to fall into this trap of every bar is having a same emphasis, because in music that has a 4/4 phrase or 3/4 meter, you can find a place to emphasize the pickup into the downbeat and the downbeat. So in a classical structure, 1 3 2 4 is the strength, right? One is the heaviest, three is next, then two, then well, it's 1 3 4 2, right? So two is the weakest beat, right? So in a movement like this, where it's just all in one, then you can very easily get this concept that every bar is equal, right? So by having a hypermeter, it allows you to make sense of the music and know where to emphasize and or where not to emphasize, right? So this is a very human musical expression of uh, if a person speaks a sentence, if I'm saying a sentence, there's a natural way to emphasize certain words, right? If I was completely monotone and every word is equal, and I will be talking, it'll be just infuriating to listen to a professor that drones on in that way, right? So you do want somebody to say, this is the most important idea, and have emphatic words, less important words, connecting words to make sense of what we're trying to say, right? So in a similar way, if you play music in this sort of monotone way, that is sort of this shellacky elevator music where nothing is important, right? So in trying to have a phrase structure, what we're really trying to establish is here is where we're going, and here's where we're coming from. So in a piece like this, where it's all in one, then it's more important to try to figure out where is the emphasis, right? Is it da dum? Is it ba da dee da? Or is it ya dum ti da da da? Right? Or is it da da dee da da da? Right? So um, uh, so that's why the hypermeter idea is really important, because Gunther Schuller was really trying to get the orchestra and conductors and musicians to try to become more communicative about where the emphasis is. Okay,
Okay.
and also it helps a great deal in. Uh, so we talked about the idea of conducting and studying your score in a way you input information in the score without looking at your score 100% of the time in your score study process, right? So let me say that again. When I first started conducting, I would sort of be in this two mode of um, uh, information acquisition, right? So that would be the score study mode, where I'm sitting at a desk, I'm looking at the score, and marking harmony, marking dynamics, who comes in, and I'm sort of looking at the score 100% of the time, right? Then after a while, I feel like, okay, I think I know what's going on in the piece, and then I start to I go into a rehearsal room with an orchestra, and then I start to conduct a piece with an orchestra. Well, the problem is I've spent 100% of my time looking at the score, looking down into the score to get the information, and then all of a sudden now I have to switch into a different mode where I have to communicate with my gestures all the information that I've learned, right? But then it's this sort of period, unless I've completely memorized the piece during that first phase, I'm sort of in this mode of conducting, right, flute, and then cello, and trombone. Oh, sorry, I missed that. So you see conductors who are conducting in a way they're not really interacting with the ensemble. They're sort of still looking at the score because it's not memorized, it's not completely internalized, right? So and here's my stance on memorization. I think for me, it takes me about 4 times the amount of time to memorize something to be able to conduct from memory. Okay, so I feel like, and this was when I was in my old mode of information acquisition, and so and many conductors choose that route, and then the cost is the repertoire that they learn is much lower, right? So that's why I kept running into conductors who would say, oh, I have a 40-piece repertoire. Excuse me? Like that's it? Like that's all you're gonna conduct for the rest of your life? Yes, I'm gonna be a Beethoven specialist, and I'm only going to conduct. In fact, I'm only going to conduct Beethoven 3, 5, and 7 because I feel all the even numbers are worthless. What? so oh, and yeah, Brahms is really a minor composer, and anything that this kind of attitude was, and I would still argue, quite prevalent in the professional conducting business, right? It's like if you're an opera conductor, all right, you learn Bohème, Traviata, and Manager Figure, Magic Flute. That's it. What? What do you mean? That's it. Well, because they are of the opinion there's more value in doing something 100 times rather than doing once of this piece, this piece, this piece. 100 different separate pieces. Um, I think that in some ways is the cause of why so many orchestras and conductors focus on such a smaller white male non-Western Western repertoire, because it actually kind of makes the workload easier to handle, right? Because if you think about it, if a conductor is really should be doing their job, they have to do more than just know those 40 pieces. They have to really learn a whole slew of repertoire from 17th, 18th, 19th, 20th century, plus all the living composers' works. I mean, if you think about it, the repertoire that as a human being can learn is limited, right? So if you spend your time doing a piece 100 times, well, then you're not going to have time to learn another 99 pieces, right? So my sort of opinion on memorization is, okay, if you're the kind of person like Barenboim who can take a picture of a score and it's in his system, okay, that's different, right? But I am not that kind of person where I have to actually for every minute of orchestral music, it takes me probably like 3 to 4 hours to really know that piece, right? Because and I've gotten more efficient as I've gotten more experience, and then as my repertoire have grown, then I get a sense of, okay, now I've studied all of the Beethoven symphonies. So now there are patterns and things that start to emerge that really helps me understand another piece by Beethoven, another piece by a Beethoven's contemporary. Right. So the first time you learn a Shostakovich symphony, it's such a massive, big lift because everything is new, right? But then the second Shostakovich symphony and third, fourth, fifth, 14th, 15th, then it becomes much more easy to understand in context what that composer's thought process is, what they are like, right? So Mahler is the same way. The first time I learned the Mahler symphony, I was like, holy cow, this guy like says the same thing over and over. What is... Because I was used to a different style of language. But then the more I learned his style, and then I became more aware of how to absorb that information. But the important thing, this is a long side ride way to get to this point. In the score acquisition, information acquisition phase, if you practice what you have to do in front of the orchestra, just as I'm trying to have you recreate in your Dandolo and solfege and dichord exercises. They're all a microcosm of the rehearsal environment that you will be in front of an orchestra. So in the score acquisition process, it's the same thing, where instead of looking at the score 100% of the time, you look down for and in the beginning, this is, if you just look at it for a second and then you try to recall, you can't do it. So in the beginning, maybe look down for 10 seconds at a passage, maybe 4 bars of music, and then look away and then recall as many details as possible. Okay, and then you start that process in your score study process where you're not looking down 100% of the time. Maybe you'll be looking down 5%, 10% of the time. And then 90, 95% of the time, away from the score that you just looked at, you're trying to recall the information, right? In biographies of Beethoven, they constantly describe him with a sketchbook around his neck, walking around the Vienna woods, right, thinking about music. I think this is actually what he was doing. He was going through in his mind all the music that he was writing, right? And he was singing through all the parts. He was singing through and reliving and in his imagination the piece, right? So as conductors, as musicians, if you get set up with this mode of acquisition, right? Imagine studying a piece. So I just multiplied 3 hours per minute of music, right? So I just spent for Beethoven 5, right? It's like a 43-minute piece. So 43 minutes times 3 hours, all right, per minute. Then you have this set of time where you have spent 90% of the time recalling the information that you looked at, right? Imagine getting in front of an orchestra after that time where you can look down and know that passage, that phrase length, whether it be a 4-bar phrase, 5-bar phrase, 6-bar phrase, 8-bar phrase, or 4 plus 4 plus 4. Okay, I know what's going to happen in the next 16 bars. Then you can actually have the ability to interact with the orchestra, give them tools that you pull out another tool, right? So it's this way of engaging with an orchestra that it becomes really exciting because now it's about interacting with people and musicians in the orchestra rather than have you I mean it was such a frustrating experience to play for conductors where you get the finger finger. It's like and never see their eyes, right? I mean, I make it a rule whenever I do all state that I at least interact with every one of the players in the orchestra with my eyes. That's sort of my goal in every rehearsal because I want everybody. I want to have communicated with them individually with the entire orchestra. That's sort of my like baseline goal, right? Because otherwise, in my earlier days, what I would do is I would get to know the principal strings and maybe the principal wind players very, very well. And then there would be people, were you in that orchestra? Are you in the orchestra? I don't recognize you. I'm sorry. Oh, you must be like in the back of the viola section, right? So it's like, right? No, but seriously, this happens all the time, right? Conductors don't put emphasis and importance on interacting with the members of the orchestra, and sometimes, I mean, I've seen professional orchestras just basically talk to the concert master. That's it, right? And imagine the kind of musical relationship you can have with a musician if they never look at you, right? That is a terrible way to make music. So in your score study process is where you can start this process of imagining, interacting with a person, another human being, and sharing this musical idea from somebody else, a composer who is trying to express their feelings without words, right? So I think that transaction of communication is absolutely crucial, right? So the hypermeter, the phrase length idea, why is that important? Because it gives you another tool to be able to look at a piece of music, I got that, and then look up and interact with the person who's playing that music, right? And I wish more teachers and mentors had emphasized this importance to me in my training. For my University of Michigan audition, one of the a session is you have this whole first day of oral skills and music theory tests. It's like 4 hours, and then you have a session with the big orchestra where you conduct for like half an hour, 3 pieces, and then there's another session with a smaller chamber orchestra where you accompany a violin soloist. So most people think of that chamber orchestra session as primarily about accompanying a violin soloist, but in fact, a question is posed to the candidates all the time. About halfway through, after about 5 minutes, the teacher, and this is really mean, but this is what he asks of the candidate. He says, "Okay, turn around, face away from the orchestra, and tell us whether the inside third stand second violin is a man or a woman." All right. So if you don't know, best thing to say is, "I have no idea," which is what I said because I was so focused on the soloist, right? But most conductors will try to say and guess when they don't know the answer. And that can only come out disastrous. You only have a 50-50 chance of just getting it right. And if you guess wrong, that's bad, right? So what is the point of that question and that test, right? He was one of the first people to point out that transactional communication between conductor and orchestra members is important, right? Okay, I got off on a tangent. Alec.
When you're approaching memorizing from the score, how do you are you envisioning the music in your head as you're going. I find I have trouble memorizing without hearing the sound, so it's easier to do in front of the group to a certain extent.
Yeah. So this I can only answer because every person has a different way of and different strength. Some people are more visually strength. Some people have more physical memory. Some people actually have sort of vocal memory of where the piece is. Some people have just auditory memory that's better. Like Barenboim that I mentioned, he literally is a kind of person who can take a picture of the score, and that picture is he can access it anytime in his brain. So oftentimes when you see him conduct, he's actually looking off into the distance, and he's not looking at the orchestra. He's like looking off to the distance, and he's accessing his scores, and he's reading his scores that he's imprinted with his photographic memory. I hate him. He's just bastard. So, but like if you're that kind of person, then okay, then you can do that. But I would argue that one of the reasons he had such a hard time with the orchestra is that the orchestra knew immediately what he was doing. They were like, oh, yeah, okay, great. You can photograph a page of score, great. But we're right here. Look at us, right? Oh my God, this is being recorded. um, so, um, so it depends on who you are and how you acquire information, right? If you're a really auditory strength person, then you actually have to hear the piece multiple times and sing through the piece. That's how it would help you memorize. I would argue that you need to learn the piece you're conducting in multiple acquisition mode, right? Especially if you are geared towards leaning in one way, whether you're a very visual person or a very auditory person or a very physical person, because one of the best way to falter on memory is relying only on one aspect. I mean, you've seen these horrific recital fails where somebody has memorized the Bach something and they've only been relying on physical memory. And then, of course, physical memory is different when you're nervous and when you're in front of 100 people, whether as versus when you're alone in a practice room. So when that physical memory fails and you don't have a theoretical understanding, you don't have any other means of memorizing, then if the physical memory fails, you're cooked, right? So as a conductor, I would really say you need to rely on multiple modes of acquisition of score, especially if you're going to memorize. Yeah, I'm terrible at memorizing, so it literally takes me 4 to 5 times the amount of time, and I hate it. And it's sort of I just feel like it's time wasted because that's just four times the amount of time I didn't get to learn other pieces. So that's my philosophy. That's my opinion. So and I don't put value judgment on. I think our society, as in general, our audience culture, classical music, places huge plus points for people who memorize. I don't really see the point, honestly. But and this is with a caveat that I just described, taking a long time to describe. They love conductors who memorize and soloists memorize because there is that sense that, oh, I'm going to have more interaction with this conductor, with this soloist, right? So yes, of course, if your memorization leads to that, great, that's fantastic, right? Because oftentimes, and I'll take the other position, people who say the same thing I do, all right, if you memorize, it takes you longer, so you'll learn less repertoire. Well, then you can't conduct like this, and then use that as a shield to not memorize. You have to have a way of have a study method that allows you to interact as if you have memorized. Yeah. Okay. Let's do some conducting. So one of the things that I would love for you to do, I'm going to take some excerpts from Beethoven 5, first movement, but here, let me share the screen. So I'm going to go into advanced mode and share only a portion of the screen so I can still see you. And then we're going to go to the Beethoven 5 excerpt. All right, so I would love to see everybody conduct, but I'm going to notate things a little bit because I want you to actually look at the section that's, so here is, this is, oh, it's not letting me notate. There we go. So this is second, violin. That's viola first. Okay, and then the second, viola first. Then let's just go to the first entry of everybody else. And then when everybody comes in here, that of course is cellos and basses. But that's clear, right? Okay. So if you could conduct beginning two fermatas, and then oh, I just moved things. Damn it! Hang on. There we go. There we go. Okay. So and we have a traditional seating, not a weird Mannheim seating. So first, second, viola, cello, bass, right? So your strings are sitting in that first, second, viola, cello. Okay. So you have to so let's practice that, right? Ba 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 extra bar. Second, viola, first, second, viola, first. Right, this can be complicated, right? I'll do it in slow motion. Ba, 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 ba. Second, viola, first, second, viola, first. So instead of doing this, right, you're actually facing the orchestra, right? And you might even, let's just use one hand, just right hand, okay? Second, first, viola. Second, viola, first. Right? Second viola first, second viola first. Da, da, da. So if we do a hypermeter, 1, 2, 3, 4, you want to go 1, 2, 3, 4. But if you do that, the viola's over there and they're going, why are you looking at the first violins? Right? So second viola first, second, right? Second viola first, nobody comes in. Second viola first. Okay, so now why am I doing this, right? It is not that I'm trying to ask you to choreograph a ballet to this movement. That is not conducting. This is simply a single tool that is necessary if you go through first time, and you realize, holy cow, nobody's coming in. They don't know where they are, right? And oh, they need help coming in. Okay, all right, no problem. Here's my tool. Here we go. Second viola first. Second viola first. Make sense? Okay, so let's have you all conduct one at a time. There's opening two fermatas, then the cue of the second viola first. Two sets of it. All right, Peter, go ahead.
I need to do this.
Bup, bup, bup. Oh, wait, hang on.
Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. So active versus passive beats, quite important. If you do, right, that first pickup was so passive, we didn't know that we were supposed to come in.
Okay.
Da, 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 dee. Da, 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 dee. Yeah, so hang on. Are we doing a cutoff version or a non-cutoff version? Where the cutoff is the
in the
down beat?
up.
Yeah. So remember, you have to place the cutoff in a way that it's clear that we're going on. So this would be cutoff. So if you start down, that was the first problem. Da 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 da. Right. All right. So okay, hang on. Two more things. This is the most difficult thing because if you do from a down position, you have to go up. Right. But if you do it in an active way, they'll go ba 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 ba. Right. So you have to have either a non-pulsed upbeat, which many conductors choose, which is I think a terrible idea in here, because what they'll if you do da 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 da, what they'll do is, oh, that's how slow, ba 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 ba. Okay, so you have to do a passive beat that's in tempo, but it's still passive. Okay, so da 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 da, but it's fortissimo. Passive, da 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 da, passive, active, ba 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 ba. So this is really tricky, right? Because if you do too big of an active upbeat to the upbeat, right, then it won't feel like an upbeat. It'll feel like upbeat, upbeat, or upbeat, downbeat, da 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 da. So we're trying to show this beat 4 of a hypermeter. This is why it's so challenging. This is why it sounds, the hypermeter idea is in a way fought so vehemently among so many conductors, because they said da 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 or bum 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 ba, right? Because they think, oh, this is fate. This is the downbeat, ba 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 ba. Well, it sounds great, it feels great, but that's not the intent, right? So in order to make this an upbeat, your upbeat has to be passive, yet show all the character and speed, right? While still trying to make this first set of 4 3/8 notes an upbeat. Okay, I think this is one of the situations, the more you learn about the piece, the more you realize, how am I supposed to show that? You're asking too much of us, Beethoven. Okay. All right. So let me see a here. Okay, let me just dial back. The reason so many people choose a slow, non-pulsed upbeat da 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 is because it's technically easier, right? It's technically easier to go, I'm getting ready. Here we go. Da 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 da. In some ways, that's much easier, right? Have you guys ever seen that Japanese conductor who actually takes like 5 seconds to give that upbeat?
I have seen that one actually.
Oh my God. It's the most hilarious thing. If you get, somebody can find it and post it on
I'll
camera.
send it to you.
It's worth a good 15-minute hearty laugh. But he couldn't figure out how to do this upbeat. So he just figured, I don't know, go ahead. And that kind of upbeat. So you have to have the tempo in mind, first of all, before you begin. And Allegro con brio, 104, 108, it feels really fast. Okay, especially if you're used to this ba 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 ba, that sort of concept, right? Right. So who has 108? Anybody have 108? Holy cow! Yikes! Da 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 da. So you have to have that tempo in mind, right? Da 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 da. So it's much easier if you think about that tempo internally. Get it ready. Got it. I got it right. Okay, here we go. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Yeah, you're getting mixed up. Second viola first.
Yeah, it's here, here, here.
Ah, okay. All right, one more
And
time.
then
Show
also
us.
just like you mentioned to have a like projected 4th beat. So I'm just bringing it back to the middle.
Okay. Can you go from the beginning again?
Yep.
But there was a slower upbeat. So you have to join the tempo. Da 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 da. Oh, good, much better. But now the amplitude and the passive versus active of that pickup has to be weaker than the actual pickup, because it was actually amplitude was slightly bigger than the actual upbeat of 4. So it was something like da 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 da. So it's fortissimo with clarinet playing, right? So passive beat, upbeat, da 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 da, da 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 da. One more time. da, da. I didn't understand it. Can you sing the part?
Da 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 da.
Okay, the cutoff was confusing. If with the orchestra, I'm not sure they would have understood the cutoff versus pickup. Okay, you have to imagine the entire string section and clarinets and both of them, right, playing. So you need something quite emphatic to make sure they cut off, and then the next beat is going on. And we're doing the version without cutoff. The cutoff is the next pickup, right? Da 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 da. So in fact, for the sustain, you have to do the slow upbeat. Da 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 da. Okay, Rachel.
Okay, wait, sorry, I'm confused. So when we do the first, it's like on the down of the first measure, downbeat of the first measure, right? It's not like the upbeat, right?
I don't understand the question. What do you mean?
Like if it's like, is it like ba 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 da, or is it just like da da da, like that?
Oh, I see. So, very good question. It is a syncopation, right? It's not
Right,
ba 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 ba,
right,
right? It's
Okay,
ba 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 ba. So it really has to feel like ba 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 rather than ba 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 ba, right? Because
so
that can
when
easily
we do
become,
the
especially at this tempo. So you have to really feel that that eighth rest as up, 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 down, up, down, up, down, up, down, yeah.
okay.
Okay.
Ba 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 ba.
Okay. Good. Very, very good. Two things. This is the hard part, everybody. The sostenuto of the second part. Because if you're not careful, that sense of cliff diving will be gone. Da 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 da. Da, 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 da. And that, if you do that physically, the orchestra will backtrack and do a big diminuendo. And you cannot do that. You cannot do a diminuendo. You have to show the sostenuto of that energy. Da 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 da. Pa, 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 beep, 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 beep. So it's sort of Jekyll and Hyde switch that ya da, 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 something like that, rather than ya da 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 da. Right. So that change is instantaneous and is not progressive. Right. So that hold that sound, because every orchestra will do a diminuendo otherwise. I guarantee. Okay. Rachel, you want to try again?
Oh yeah.
Don't push the eighth nets together. Really. Very good. But the second set of viola, second viola first cue was a little bit late. You know, and maybe there was latency, but you got to keep it flowing. Okay. Viola first, second viola first, second. Okay. All right, Rehan, you want to try it?
All right.
All right.
Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba.
Okay, so try not to do a cutoff, because if you do a cutoff, you're adding adding a whole beat. Okay, and a whole beat is a whole measure in this piece, right? So what we're really trying to do is ba 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 rather than ba 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 ba, because you have to do
Right.
a cutoff and then do another downbeat, right?
Okay.
da 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 da, ba 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 be. Sorry, I did a slow.
Yeah.
Da, 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 da.
Ba, 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 ba. The beat where everyone's on, where would you place your hand though?
Sorry,
You
say
know,
it again.
you go second viola first, and then where does your hand go?
Oh, back to the center. So
Oh, just back
second
to the center?
viola first center. Second viola first center. Because nobody plays on this on the that
center?
empty bar. Yeah.
But in a traditional orchestra, who sits in the center?
Well, it would be between seconds and viola, so no one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I understood.
Try again, one more time.
Da, 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 da. Second, first, second viola first.
Wait, yeah. Second viola first. Second
Oh.
viola first. Because it's first, second viola cello. So first, second viola.
Second viola first.
There you go. Yeah.
Viola. Gotcha.
Yeah. Awesome. Alec.
Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba. Ba, ba, ba.
Good, good. Try not to have your left hand sort of going at the same time. Try to focus the energy all on one, right? Okay. And then you're practicing the head down conductor. So try to do more head up conducting. Okay, one more time.
Ba, 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 ba. Ba, 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 ba.
Much better. Now, here's the thing: when you sustain, think about sound as this sort of hot stove that you're touching. And if you don't touch it, when you touch it, it activates a sound, right? So, ba 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 ba, you have sound, right? But if you go ba 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 ha, and it's up here, it's not really engaging with the sound. Does that make sense? So it's not ba 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 ba, because that communicates a little bit of you can't really do anything with the sound. But if you have contact with the sound, then you can pull it or sustain it to do something. But then that's all you have. So it's contact with sound. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Right. So think about that as a concept where we're really trying to mold sound when we touch it. Right. So it's a physical object, and if everybody sort of senses that, oh, okay, there is some kind of physical object that the conductor is manipulating by how they move through that space, then it's much easier for the musicians to feel, okay, I think I know what she wants, right? Whereas if we only see sort of contact point, ba 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 ba, ba 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 ba, then it's sort of like, okay, my bow doesn't do that. My air doesn't do that, right? So we're trying to have a relationship with how we interact with that space that is as empathetic to how they interact with their bow, with their air, because it's about contact with the waves. Yep. Okay. Amy.
Ba-ba-da-bum. Ba-ba-ba-bum. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba.
Okay, two things. I would say that it would similar with Alec. When you hold the sound, it's still up in the air too much, right? But even if you don't get down to the bottom of the sound, right, you can still hold the sound in some way as if you're imagining you're holding or stretching the sound in this way. Da 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 da. You can still hold the sound that way, right? But if you ba 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 ba, that's harder to see for the orchestra to be. Does she hear this? Is she holding the sound for us? Right. Try again. Think of it as like a little bit of a sphere that you're manipulating the sound, how depending on how you cross through that space.
Okay. Ba 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 bum. Ba 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 bum. Ba ba ba.
That was much better. I could see you kind of going through that space, but you have to have a little more conviction about the sostenuto at the end of that, right? Because you kind of give up on the sound a little bit in order to give the upbeat.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Yuje.
Okay. So I was actually confused. Like, can you actually hear like the upbeat and the hypermeter like as an upbeat?
Let's see
Or can
it.
you hear it?
Sure.
Okay. Bum, 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 bum.
Okay, two things. Really good. I would say though, let's try to do it one hand first, because if you start to bring the left hand too much as a crutch, it can really get in the way. Okay. Two, your tempo of the second violin viola first was about 40% faster than the upbeat, right? So I think that's dangerous, right? Because I think setting the tradition of ba 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 and then ba 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 pi 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 pi, that's sort of bleeding into that a little bit, right? And I think I think it's actually much more menacing and dangerous for this entire strings plus the two clarinets fortissimo to be the same speed as as that rather than ba 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 bi or ba 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 bi. Somehow sort of oh, it's bigger, so it's going to be slower. No, I think the menace comes from that holy cow, I can't believe a cheetah moves that fast or a bear moves that fast. It's sort of that sense of ta 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 ta, whoa whoa, oh my god, right? Not pa 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 pa, hee 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 ha. Okay, I can run from that. That's not scary, right? But it's the sense that the massive sound is just as fast as the gazelle, right? That's when it's terrifying, when you realize, holy cow, that's fast and it's large, right? So I think that's where the menace comes from. So be careful that it's not two tempos. It's actually in the same tempo. Okay, one more time. I wasn't quite sure about your upbeat, what you meant by that.
Oh, so I was thinking like if you can hear like the first beat, like bum, 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 bum.
Oh, so it looks like a 4.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
yeah. I wouldn't get
is it
too
okay
hung
to,
up
like-
on whether it looks like a 4, right? But it should feel like an upbeat. So if that involves showing a 4, sure. But I think as I also said, the hypermeter is for your own organization. Because in fact, when the second viola first cue is happening, if you do a 4 pattern, violas are like, why are you cueing the first violin, right? So in fact, you have to do a 1, 2, 3, 4, which is not a 1, 2, 3, 4. It's opposite of our usual 4 pattern, right? So I think whether the hypermeter looks like a 4, I think that's less important.
Okay.
One more time.
Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Dun, 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 dun.
Yeah, it's curious. Everybody is singing this sort of diminuendo on the second fermata, and in fact, that's what you're showing. All right, so you have to really sustain, and I'm telling you, orchestras will not want to sustain. They don't want to be the last person sustaining. They want to be the first ones out because I'm going to hide in there, right? So what's going to happen cumulatively in an orchestra is ba 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 ba, or ba 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 ba, and one guy is, come on, everybody hold the sound, right? So if you let the orchestra diminuendo, just as you're all singing, this is why this is difficult. You have to be instantaneous in the change of character. That's the hard part. One more time.
Ba, 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 ba.
Much better on the sustaining, but the second violin entry was so loud they would have played forte.
Ah,
Right, they would have pop pop pop. Okay, all right,
okay.
much better. Andrea, do you want to try?
Sure, thank you.
All right.
I'll do this. Ba 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 ba.
Very good, very good. I like this idea as well because that instantly changed. But be careful that doesn't become your shorthand, right? Because sometimes we tend to use that kind of things to um, signify something while not really showing exactly with our baton or hands, right? So any kind of shorthand. I mean, this is a really, really useful tool for saying articulation, articulation, everybody, right? And I've seen conductors use that very, very
Effectively?
yeah. So it's in rehearsal. It's absolutely crucial to have that kind of hey, 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 right? So to get people to articulate better and do that, but be careful that you don't substitute that too early, because in some ways our imaginary orchestra is perfect, right? So we don't need to pull out that tool yet, right? So if you pull out that tool first, then the orchestra is like, we're actually playing it quite articulately. You could fall into that trap, right? Because you should pull tools out only when you hear that, oh, I'm gonna need to pull out that pull from the third drawer, right? So be careful about pulling out tools that is very useful, but it becomes less useful if you go there automatically.
That makes
Right.
sense. So should I just make sure I have that feeling but without using the tool?
Exactly. So can you try without the
From the
Moment.
top?
yeah.
Nope, I didn't do it, sorry. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba.
Good, but then you transferred it to your left hand.
Ah,
Okay,
okay,
so
got it.
be careful of how we use those tools, right? You don't want to, especially if you're working with a professional group, you do not want to pull these tools out unless it's absolutely necessary, right? So the left hand or the quiet or or like these kinds of things, it signals to the orchestra, is she really listening to us, right? So be careful of using those tools. Everybody, did you see how Andrea used her left hand for sostenuto, right? This would be a moment, great use of the left hand, and I'm using that, right? Because this, you have to do something a little extra. So that's a very useful, right? Great, awesome. Okay, I'm gonna jump to another place. Hang on, where's my annotate tool? Huh? Where'd it go? Hang on, let me. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna erase some of these markings first. Okay, actually, yeah, we have just a couple minutes. All right, one tricky turn. Actually, let's go to this place. Da da dee da 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 dee da. Where'd it go? Is that in here?
That's on the second.
Oh, that's not in here. Okay. Okay. Okay, let's do this place. Sorry. We're gonna go from Yeah, right here. So we're going to go from here. And I would love for you to show the hypermeter of emphasis, right? So this is a 4, ba 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 beam, bum, ba, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and so what I'm going to do is actually let's can I send you the no, hang on. Yeah, let's just do right here. Okay. So what we're going to do is start from ba 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 this horn call, ba 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 beam bum ba, and that fortissimo eighth note is beat 4 of the hypermeter. 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4 and 1 and 2, da 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 dee da, 4 and 1 and 2 and dee da, ba da dee da do da. So let's do this phrasing, okay? And I want you to be able to show us this emphasis of sol do si do re la la sol, sol do si do re do la sol. So that's first layer, and then second layer, see if you can bring in the cello basses. So dum ti da pa 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 pi da dum ti da pa 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 pi da dum ti da di bum pi da. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna stop annotating. Okay, let's go opposite order. Andrea?
So just to clarify, we can conduct it into, or you do still, because I know you said you don't want the hypermeter to, it's for you more than it is for the orchestra.
It's for you more, but we the main thing is to show the emphasis of the second bar. Sol, do, si, do, re, la, la, sol.
Okay.
Okay. So start from the horn call, right? Da 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 ding bum bum.
Ba-ba-ba-bum, bum, bum, ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-dum, ba-da-da-da-da-da-da. I don't think I got the cellos in as well as I could.
Yeah, I didn't quite see the cellos and basses. So cellos and basses are probably wondering, how about us, right? So yeah. Okay, EJ.
Okay. Ba ba bum 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 ba dee da 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 dee da 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 da.
Yeah, be careful about repeating gestures that look exactly the same, right? Because the second time, the cellos and basses are going, yeah, we know. So if you want to show something, a repeating idea again, then you got to do something else that looks a little more different or give them another idea, right? So be careful of getting to this pattern of, especially, this phrase repeats, right? So on that second phrase, if you look exactly the same, the orchestra is like, well, he's just doing a ballet, right? So you have to, in one of the things you're looking for in score study is if something repeats, is there something different that I can show, right? So for example, it goes up, right? So perhaps you could show on the first phrase, something that it looks like an emphasis, or it's a next staircase in an energy level, or intensification, or something, so that if something repeats, you don't want to be in a position where you haven't given the orchestra anything new. Okay. All right.
So can I just leave out like the cue for the cellos and basses like in the second time? So
yeah, of course. Yeah. Because once they're in, then I once saw a conductor at Aspen, and he worked on something in rehearsal a lot, right? So all of us expected for him to give the cue in the performance for that passage, right? But in the performance, he went to somewhere else because he had rehearsed it. It was working. He didn't need to emphasize with another big cue. He realized it was going to be fine. So he paid attention to something else in that moment. So in that moment, the orchestra was like, huh? Oh. So it was a bit shocking because the middle school band director and myself would sort of would have done that passage in performance. Remember this passage? Here's a cue, right? But he chose to not even bother with it because he knew it was going to be fine. So he paid attention to something else. Right? So there was kind of a lesson in that, right? So if you find that the bass and cellos come in fine on that first cue, right, then you can, next entry is the same thing, 4 bars later, they can count 4 bars. Yeah. Amy.
Bum, 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 bum. Da, 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 da.
Okay, in both your singing and your conducting, I couldn't really tell whether the emphasis was on da da or da da ti da. One more time.
Okay. Bum, 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 bum. Da, 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 da. I don't think I
Okay.
got that right.
All right, there's a bit of latency, so I can't really think because in the exact moment of the B, it skipped that beat. But I saw your head move your head a little more to really emphasize the saram pira. So that was good. Be careful of using our bodies to. Now, of course, if the orchestra isn't doing it, and so one of the when I work with orchestra conductors of younger students, they've gotten into so much bad habits because they realize if they don't show a bigger gesture, it doesn't happen, right? So they get into this especially terrible cycle of you start a piece of music and then there are all these things you want to show as a conductor, and then of course the students are so busy like learning their instrument and sight reading, so they can't like musical emphasis or phrasing is just like not in their vocabulary yet, right? So then in order to get them to do a particular phrasing, you over conduct, you conduct in such a way is an overemphasis, right? But what happens, in fact, by the concert time, they're actually, the difference between a professional group and a younger group is just that the acquisition of information just takes longer and it takes a repeated process, exposure to get that done. But by the time, even when a younger group gets to performance level, they're actually, in many cases, memorize the music. They are really looking for input. And in fact, the initial experience of in fact the conductors of younger conductors are conditioned, oh, I have to show more for it to happen, right? So as that gets repeated, then the conducting becomes more exaggerated and over conducting, and then they get used to that because they get used to getting results if they over conduct. So the conductors themselves are being conditioned, oh, I have to do it this way to show that gesture, right? So I have to constantly tell myself, by the time the Cornell Orchestra gets to performance, their way of looking for information is just as sophisticated as a professional orchestra. It just took them a little longer to get there, right? So if I conduct in an over conducting, over emphatic, without nuance, because the more you over conduct, nuance is thrown out the window, right? So your head is involved, your whole body's involved. If you basically delete nuance, then your musical result is that which is much more, much less than what the ensemble is actually ready for, right? So the thing I'm always telling younger conductors of young ensembles is that as you get closer to the performance state, you have to also temper your over conducting and actually listen more, because if something's happening, you don't need to really emphasize. You can just show in a much more subtle way. And then you'll find that the music making will become much more sophisticated, much more complex, much more refined, right? So be careful of showing an idea using your head, because the more you get used to that, then your subtlety, is just kind of erased out, right? So see if you can just do it with just your hands, just your right hand, rather right? So think about how you emphasize and what kind of subtle differences in your hands you can show that'll actually allow you to make music in a much more complicated way, not complicated. Complicated is not the right word. In a more subtle, nuanced, sophisticated way. Make sense? Okay, Rehan. Oh, I think we're out of time. So we will continue this, but just a reminder, we have Heather Buckman coming on Wednesday as our guest speaker. November 30 is our next class after that, because you guys have a study and final period starting next week. So we do not meet as a class on the 16th and 18th. Okay, so after the 11th, Heather Buckman is our guest speaker, and then the next time we meet is after Thanksgiving on November 30, which is when the Beethoven 5 recording is due. Okay, all right. I'm sorry I kept you 3 minutes over again. Andrea, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so like, yeah, I have a question about like previous video feedback. So I actually didn't saw it like